And welcome back, everybody, to another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. Auburn is back on the road this weekend for the second straight week playing the Arkansas Razorbacks, and the season is almost about closed out in terms of the regular season, getting set here to keep rolling through November. And we bring our good friend Paul Finebaum back on the show today. Our publisher, Ronnie Sanders, is also joining us. And Paul, I mean, it's week 11, and I feel like there's really no other sport out there that goes by as fast as college football does, because it seems like just yesterday we were previewing the season, June or July, and all of a sudden everything flies by.
Well, the actual season is the shortest. I agree with you. When you travel every week, you kind of count at 1, 2, 3, and all of a sudden you're at 11, and the next thing you know, it's over. But I think it's because there's so much happening. It's not like the NBA where they take a week off or whatever they take a week off for. But it also essentially starts at media days, so you have that long buildup. But I think it's been a remarkable year. When we talked last, Auburn was heading to A&M. There was such bright hope for A&M, and Auburn wasn't sure what it had. I think Auburn's probably fared a little better, at least in terms of which way the signals are pointing.
How do you think in Hugh Freeze's first year, considering the mess he inherited, what do you think so far?
Ronnie, I'm mostly impressed with what Hugh Freeze has done. I felt, as we talked before the year, that getting to a bowl game would be good. 7 or 8 wins would be Coach of the Year area for him, and I think that's about where we are right now with a chance. I mean, the schedule was always front loaded, and I think the Cal game was critical, and then trying to steal a game down the stretch, and I think we are facing that game where Auburn has to steal. I think mostly it's gone pretty much according to plan, and I'll defer to you guys who are far more experts on the offensive coordinator and the controversy there. I mean, I don't waste a lot of time in terms of making decisions whether coaches should come or go, and I felt like a couple of weeks ago that change should have been made. But I like what Hugh has done, and I think he's made the most out of the least.
What do you think? Obviously, Auburn's got 3 games left. You got Arkansas, New Mexico State, and Alabama at home. So New Mexico State's better, but you got to think Auburn's going to win that game. I mean, do you see Auburn winning at Arkansas? Do you see them playing well against Alabama and Jordan-Hare? I mean, what do you see the rest of the way?
Yeah, I mean, right now, Ronnie, I think the worst thing that could have happened to Auburn was Arkansas winning a game, because I think they have some confidence now, and they're really they're not a bad team. They're not a great team, but I think they're now a team that feels like, okay, we just did something nobody thought we could do. Let's do it one more time, and however many more times you have to do it. So I'm probably leaning a little more in the Arkansas way this weekend. I think Alabama is always. I mean, I'll spare you the history of the game. You both know it. There's no reason why that game 2 years ago should have ever gone the way it did. So as a result, I think that was a better Alabama team than this team. So probably also a better Auburn team. But I do think there's some unpredictability ahead.
Speaking of, Nathan, you want to jump in?
I was just gonna get your take, Paul, on. I think Pittman is just kind of an interesting case this year, because I think everyone wants to make a coach's situation out to be black or white. They're either on the hot seat or they're completely safe. I've yet to necessarily, and I haven't dove in head first with our Arkansas network yet this week previewing the game, but just kind of your take on Sam Pittman. I mean, they lose 6 straight games. Obviously, they weren't great last year. They're 7-6. Things really look like they could have been down in the dumps, but they get that win. They have an opportunity here. I don't know if they'll go to a bowl game, but 5-7 for Arkansas. I know their expectations aren't through the roof, but do you think he's completely safe to be back at Arkansas next season?
Right now, I do. Saturday could change that. but I thought he had to win some. He just had to do something to give fans reason to believe, and he's extremely well liked. Now, why does that matter? Because it's harder to fire a guy that the fans relate to, that feel good about, that even though they may question his coaching from time to time. But I think the fact that he fired Dan Enos and followed it up with a win is tremendously in his favor. Now, he's also the guy that hired Dan Enos, but we tend to forget that. We always, man, what a great move that was. But I feel right now he's going to skate by, and I hope he does. I don't like that many coaches. Because you try to have a distance, but he is probably one of the most genuine people I've met in this industry, and that is a rare thing you say about head football coaches, Ronnie. I know you're not going to tell the truth here, but I know you agree with me.
100%. Talking about last week's game, they played Florida. Obviously, Billy Napier, Scott Strickland. Talk a little bit about that situation.
Well, I have a lot of friends who just keep telling me Billy Napier is going to turn this thing around, and Billy Napier is a great guy, and what a great decision it was to hire him. And I keep asking, well, I haven't seen it, and they keep telling me, well, they're close, and I keep saying, well, they just lost Arkansas at home. So I think for Napier, he gave back a game that he literally stole from South Carolina about 3 weeks ago, and I realize you guys aren't following all these off middle of the day games while you're at another game, but that was really important. But he gave it back. So what does he have now? He's got a trip to LSU, loss. There's a trip to Missouri. Can we also say loss? And then he's going to roll the dice. 3 weeks from now, he is literally going to have to beat Florida State to get to a bowl game. And I think if he lands at 5-7, I think the powers that be will meet and probably decide to keep him for one more year. That's always that impossible decision. Do you gamble? Do you take a chance on keeping him and be in the same spot a year from now? That's what happened with Dan Mullen a couple of years ago. That's what happened with Brian Harsin after 1 year. Or do you just make a change? To make a change, you better know what you're doing, and I think that's the hardest thing in the world right now is to have that coach ready to go when you've already just gone through a change, and you have a new president there. I think that favors Napier surviving.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm looking at the records. Him and Harsin between 2 years, Power 5 and SEC, not too far off, but. You mentioned, Paul, that feeling like he would probably be able to skate by. I think recruiting has a lot to do with that as well, and that's something that was never in play for Brian Harsin, and it's almost the complete other end of the spectrum. Florida has the number 3 class in the country for 2024 right now, so I feel like you said, the powers kind of making that decision. Let's talk again next year, sort of thing, when you can bring in a lot more talent on the roster. But
and
probably
Nathan, I think what you have to watch on recruiting, and you guys follow it very closely, I know, is what you have today, and is there any slippage between now and the end of the year? If you end up losing 4, how many games in a row will they have lost? I'm trying to keep count. 5 straight at the end, or 4 straight?
4 or 5, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a terrible way to end the season from a recruiting standpoint. But I think Florida is rich enough in terms of what it offers that they'll skate on that. And I don't see a win in this next group, but a win would secure him. Let's just go ahead and say he's back.
I guess the other question is, assuming he is back or he's not back, who makes the next hire? With a new president, does Scott Strickland survive? The people that I talk to are not sure that he gets to hire another coach.
Well, I think I think that's one reason why he will be back this year. And then you see what happens next year, though, and schedule. We know their schedule. It's brutal. Mm-hmm. I mean, they ended up with one of the worst schedules of anybody. And by the way, we don't know when all these games are, but we're going to find out in December. And I'm already hearing some crazy stories. I mean, there's just some of the places where you normally had bye weeks. You're playing a tough road game. Get ready for a lot of screaming in mid-December. But as far as Scott Strickland is concerned, he's well liked, highly respected in the industry. Yeah, but you are. What was the old Bill Parcells line about? You are what your record says you are. I kind of hate it, but ads are what their football coach says they are, and he hired Dan Mullen, and now he's hired Billy Napier.
Well, I think and Florida fans notoriously, and I've lived it, as you remember, 2.5 seasons. We had 3 really highly ranked recruiting classes. But Jeremy Foley knew what he wanted to do. He had a new president then, and they go out and hire Urban Meyer, and
yeah,
it works out.
Right, Ronnie, tell me this though. I think when things are going poorly, there's no worse fan base in America than Florida when it comes to eating their own.
It's absolutely. Auburn and LSU were pretty close, but
yeah.
Florida's pretty rough.
And the difference, I think, LSU has. Both Auburn and LSU have great tradition, but Florida has had little pockets of greatness, and mostly they've been in the wilderness. But they believe that they are on the same level as Alabama, LSU, Georgia, and the fact that Georgia is doing so well just eats at them. So I think it's a safe call right now, but don't go out there and get just pasted in one of these last 3 games,
which I think they could.
No, easily.
Let's talk a little bit about Mississippi State.
Do we have to?
I mean, there are a lot of jobs that potentially could open. There are also a lot that you could end up with, not much at all. But
well, in the defense of Zach Arnett, I'll just go ahead and say this: he was hired under one of the worst set of circumstances I've ever seen. Not about him, but just you lose a coach. You got vultures coming in trying to steal all your players, and you don't have a long time to make a decision. So he was given the keys, and I think the leadership at Mississippi State was hoping that he would keep the car on the road. He hasn't. And Saturday night against Kentucky was nothing short of a disaster. They were blown out at home by really a middling team, guys. Kentucky has done very little lately after a promising beginning. And from what little I saw of the game, they didn't look well prepared. They didn't look well coached. And that spells problems. They're at A&M this weekend. Probably a loss. Southern Miss at home, a win, and then the Egg Bowl. It's going to come down to the Egg Bowl. And I'm not suggesting they have to beat Ole Miss, which they did last year. But if that game gets away from them, I think so will Zach Arnett's job.
I think the other thing at Mississippi State is, Auburn was hiring hiring Cohen. And so you had a lot of turmoil at Mississippi State. And I think they were just trying to keep their class together.
Yeah, and don't forget, Zach Selman, the athletic director, came in after the hire.
Right.
And I don't know if you guys know Zach, but he's kind of a different breed. There are a couple of baseball coaches in the SEC. They're ADs, Ray Tanner and John Cohn. There are a couple of institutionalists like Strickland, Greg Byrne, Ross Bjork. But Zach comes from a really different world. He spent most of his career at Oklahoma, part of a famous family, and he's very, very, very young and very ambitious. And what does every AD want to do if they can? Hire a new football coach.
Hire a coach and build facilities.
Yeah, and he's well thought of. I mean, a lot of people think he'll be the next AD at Oklahoma.
Paul, we've talked a little bit about Arkansas here, and I think after this game, there will obviously be a ton of look ahead because that's the case annually for both of these schools. Both schools get their pre-Iron Bowl tune-up game, but everybody's just looking to the Iron Bowl. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Alabama and kind of how that matchup looks right now because, look, the last time we talked, you mentioned it was week 4. Alabama, A, they had just lost to Texas, and then B, they went on the road to USF, and I think it was 3-3 in the third quarter. So things were not going very well for them. What have you kind of seen out of their development over the course of the season? I know you're going to get eyes on them again this Saturday. What can you say about the job that they've done sort of turning things around, and how do you see that game kind of going in the Iron Bowl?
Yeah, I think it's been one of the most remarkable turnarounds I've seen under Nick Saban. Well, first of all, there aren't many turnarounds under Nick Saban. So the base point when we talked after that South Florida game, that felt like a loss, and everyone had to pause. And I told you guys, what my observations, and they were fairly negative, but we're 180 from there. And it's all about defense, I think. I mean, I know Jalen Milroe is getting tremendous praise. He's National Quarterback of the Week and all the things that are fantastic for your resume. But if you look at their big games, Ole Miss, LSU, Tennessee, Texas A&M, I mean, they have suffocated teams in the second half. I mean, nobody scored maybe 3 points, 7 points. And they've been dominant, and that's how they're beating people. And this is very old school. Whether it's Kevin Steele, Nick Saban, T-Rob, I don't know who's in charge of that defense, quite frankly, but whoever is doing an amazing job. And Milroe has matured and played a lot better. I think Tommy Rees has finally quit trying to start Tyler Buckner. And if Alabama wins the national championship, and they're certainly within realm, I mean, that's going to be one of the all-time trivia questions: who started the third game of the season? And what happened to him afterwards? And have we ever seen him since?
Speaking of guys that deserve a lot of credit, what about Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri?
He, I mean, if you freeze a moment in time, Ronnie, a couple of seconds remaining in the Kansas State game when he inexplicably gets called for delay a game and turns a 56-yard field goal into a 61. I'm not sure I would have expected him to be back after the season.
I agree.
It was that close, and that field goal, and then he dials up a fake. I think it was a fake punt against South Carolina that turned that game around, and suddenly they're a really good team. And I think he's already in the house now with a big year, whether they beat Tennessee or slide home with the remaining games. They've got Florida waiting on you guys here, but one of those Coach of the Year candidates. I mean, I'm really not hung up on who wins Coach of the Year, but he'll be in the running.
What do you think about Jane Beamer's long-term future at South Carolina? How does that?
He's well liked. He talks a great game, but I could live without some of the antics. I think he's a coach that literally does not know how to keep his mouth shut. And it started this season. He was making fun of the Shane crew at the first game against North Carolina, even though they lost the game. He's talking about, we came out there for the second half. Where were they? They were eating hot dogs. He was complaining about something else. Remember in the game when he ended up breaking his foot afterwards. After the Jacksonville State game, he said, great win, guys. Let's go celebrate. You just beat Jacksonville State. I mean, I realized, maybe he grew up admiring Rich Rodriguez, but things have changed. I just think this has been a bitter disappointment this year. And I would have told you maybe a couple of months ago that he might be the next coach of Virginia Tech because of his family lineage. But right now, I don't think he's interested in leaving. I think he loves where he is. The fans still like him. And here's why. Unlike Auburn, unlike Alabama, their expectations are 7 or 8 wins. They're not hung up on doing what others have done. And what he did a year ago in beating Tennessee and Clemson back-to-back was probably going to last him a couple of years.
I think the biggest question going around the conference is A&M. What's going to
I was wondering why we took so long to get to that.
I thought we'd leave the best for last. Let you unload on him.
Yeah, I think I've interacted A&M a couple of times this year. I was out there for the Auburn game. I was with A&M people last week in Oxford, and I still don't feel like they're ready to pull the cord on Jimbo. But let's look at the schedule for a second. I think that's where you always start. They've got who is this week? Is it Mississippi State?
Mississippi State.
They have Mississippi State, and then I think
Central Arkansas.
Yeah, so I think they'll win. I think they'll go into Baton Rouge on the final weekend. Either finishing 7-5 or 8-4. I think 8-4 they'd take it right now and go home. 7-5. I think he's right on the cut line. Today, I think he's going to survive. For some of the reasons I've said earlier, except you add in $76 million buyout, and then maybe what is it going to cost to bring in a whole new staff, and who are you going to bring in? And I think they're really stuck, and fans are despondent. But on the other hand, I think had Connor Wegman stayed healthy, they would have won a couple of these games. I mean, so you always need a narrative if you're on the verge of getting fired, and he's got one.
I guess my question is, he's had one good year. I mean, they hired him to win a national championship. He went 9-1 during the COVID year. And other than that, it really hasn't been very good.
No. He's been terrible. I mean, right? I mean, his road record is abysmal. And, I think they're really stuck at a point right now where they just really don't know what to do. This isn't Florida where there's still some newness, or Mississippi State when the circumstances, or even South Carolina where there's been some success. I mean, I don't know how to get around. Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M has been a colossal failure. Tell me how it hasn't been. And I think what they're going to do is roll the dice on next year and say, okay, we've been close. We've almost done this and almost done that, and they're in every game. I mean, I think that's important. They lost to Alabama, Tennessee, Ole Miss, pretty much final possession, and I think that's what keeps coaches alive. And with Texas in the SEC next year, with a clean slate, I think they'll gamble on one more year.
Well, A&M's they've underperformed for decades.
Yeah.
How does that job compare to, there's 6 schools that have won every conference championship since the 60s. How does that job compare to those 6, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas and Oklahoma? I mean, how good a job is it? I know they've got a lot of money, but
Ronnie, I think it's a great job for the reasons you laid out. I mean, there's nothing wrong. The only thing wrong with the job is tradition, and you can overcome tradition. They haven't been able to, but I don't know how to explain it. I mean, but I know a lot of people that would like that job because, the facilities are incredible. You have a passionate fan base, and there's simply no excuse for losing, except they keep losing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are certain schools like that where you just simply cannot understand why they don't win, and I think A&M would be at the top of that list.
Florida was like that, before Spurrier got there.
Yeah, exactly. Florida had never done anything other than Charlie Pell's years, which they went down in smoke.
Well, they were cheating. So
I think you just have to. I think you have. I think you have. If this a year, I think if they let's just for the sake of argument, if they fire Jimbo Fisher this year, where do they go? And I think you have to think about that, and you have to have a plan. And I'm not saying that. I mean, I don't want to say they don't have a plan. If you're the AD there, you always have a plan. I mean, you know a lot of ADs, Ronnie. They're not sitting. He's not sitting around going, I have no idea. I mean, every AD has a list,
Mhm.
and it's just it's not a matter of money, because the money they can find the money, and what is it, 76 this year and 65? It doesn't matter. I mean, these are billionaires out there. It's just a matter of what do we do. And the one thing that may be going in Jimbo's favor, it's a minor thing, but I think it's always important. And you guys saw it at Auburn. You got a president that made a terrible decision. Then you had a president that made a good decision. They have an interim president. He's a retired general, and right now, that's a guy. And I say this because I'm just guessing. That's a guy that probably doesn't want to go through the scorn of the national media asking the question, why did you fire a guy and pay him $75 million? I mean, what did he do wrong when you got guys like Jim Harbaugh surviving? So, I mean, on Jimbo's worst day, he's quirky. He makes the incorrect decision at times, but I don't think anybody. I don't think he's bringing disgrace to the program. And I think you better have a better. I mean, I think to spend $77 million or whatever it is, I think you better have a better. You need a better reason than, well, he's just not winning enough games.
I think the other thing is you talk about South Carolina and Beamer being well liked. Jimbo can rub people the wrong way. And maybe there's some of that too. But I think, you make a point about where do they go?
I mean, if I ask you, Ronnie, give me the perfect candidate to replace. I mean, Jimbo Fisher. You may come up with a better choice than I do, but I don't have a good one right now.
I don't either. And I think the other thing is, can A&M go pull what USC did, what LSU did? Yeah. Can they go hire a big name? Because those things before last year, they really didn't happen very often.
Yeah, even Miami with like Cristobal.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger issue here is, how do you get the right guy? You go back the last 5 or 6 years. I would have thought 6 years ago Matt Rule would be a really good coach somewhere. He went to the wrong franchise in the NFL, but he made a lot of money. Cristobal, don't understand that. Complete mystery. But you got a guy like Dan Lanning. I mean, he might be the hottest young coach in the country. And, if you called Dan and offered him all the money in the world, why would he leave Oregon right now? I think he's got his eyes on a bigger job.
Speaking of Oregon, and you talked a little bit about Harbaugh before we got rolling, we were talking a little bit about that. It's just a crazy situation over there at Michigan. I know we don't have a lot of answer, and that's obviously not SEC country, which is obviously what we focus a lot on this show. But we're still kind of getting some answers. But man, I mean, what was your reaction to that, Paul? And I guess kind of what do you make of that situation now? Because this could be the best team in the country this season.
Yeah. When I heard it 3 weeks ago, I thought it seemed like the NCAA may be out to get Harbaugh, but that was 10 years ago. When you think about this one fact, when 13 football coaches get on a conference call with the commissioner and demand action, that tells you that this isn't a rush to judgment. These are guys that know what they're talking about. Everybody in the industry knows what's happening everywhere else. And I think the misnomer people have is everybody cheats, everybody steals sign. True, but not to do what they have done. And I've yet to hear Harbaugh blatantly and vehemently deny this allegation. He's given a bunch of nonsensical gibberish. To me, it seems like he whether he knew about it or not, he's still responsible. And I think a severe punishment has to be laid down.
Well, and I think the other thing is, how would he not know about it? Number one. And number two, like you said, I mean, look, we used to steal signals. I don't think there's anything, we had a guy during the game who would stand on, when we were in Florida, he would stand on the sidelines and his job was to steal signals. The difference is he wasn't going to games and scouting. Yeah. I mean, that's.
And by the way, Ronnie, what that guy did is legal. You can steal signals. Mm-hmm. You just can't send a guy to go steal signals.
Right. Yeah, you just can't go to games and steal them,
Yeah, it's just part of the game to to get it. But yeah, coaches. But I don't know. I mean, I think we do forget, as you said, Nathan, this may be the best team in the country, and if they keep winning, there's no way to wipe the. I was explaining the story today. I said I don't remember anything like this since 2010, when about this moment in time, the story broke about Cam Newton, but a totally different situation though. Cam Newton, did the SEC, let him get away with it? Yeah, but I think the one part about the Cam Newton story is what would have happened had they declared him ineligible. I have a pretty good idea what would have happened. And it would have been one of the biggest disasters in college football history, because there would have been lawsuits. There would have been protests. I think the integrity, they made a very measured decision with Cam. And I think Auburn got away with a national championship, but the SEC and I think college football got away without blowing up the system. Whether you like the system or not, it prevailed.
Well, especially after 2004.
Yeah. And I don't know. I've always wondered if, I'm still waiting for the bagman to appear.
Speaking of bagman,
make sure before my last day on Earth, let me tell you who the bagman was, because I do know.
Speaking
Ronnie,
of
I was gonna say. Speaking of bagman.
By the way, I didn't say I believed that it was really a bagman. I just know who the bagman is supposed to be.
Oh, jeez.
Go ahead, Nathan. What were you gonna say?
No, so I was giving the floor to you. You said speaking of bagman, and then you got to keep going from that.
Well, speaking of bagman, can Kiffin sustain what he's doing? Can Kiffin sustain what he's doing?
I think it's always difficult. I mean, he's on an amazing run right now. He's on the same run last year when it imploded, and this, he's got a different type of team. Remember all those great recruits, quarterback transfers he got in there? I haven't seen one of them yet, because Justin Dart's been phenomenal. But this is, Lane's always been a good coach, but this may be the season of his life.
That is the one that you were just talking about, A&M. And maybe I'm completely out of understanding here, but if something were to happen at A&M either this year or next year, wonder if Kiffin wouldn't be a guy, because I think maybe he's close to that area of big name head coach you swipe from another pretty good program, or maybe I'm completely wrong.
I agree. Not to redo last November, but I think Kiffin looked at Auburn and wanted to go there because he felt it would give him a chance to compete with Saban, with Kirby. And I don't feel, every time I say this, Ole Miss fans come out of the woods, but I don't think deep down, he'll never admit this, Lane feels like he is on the same plane at Ole Miss. And I think his roster speaks to it. He doesn't have the same players that Kirby and Nick Saban have. And he's done a great deal with them, and I think he has had them before. I mean, he's been at Southern Cal, been at Tennessee briefly, and he's coached at Alabama, and he knows the difference. He knows the difference in what the defensive line of Texas A&M looks like, and Georgia looks like, and Alabama looks like versus the one he has. It doesn't mean they don't play well. I mean, his guys overachieve.
Yeah, we're gonna see. He's got an opportunity this weekend.
Yeah,
and it's a tough opportunity, but he's got.
Here's where you watch. I mean, if they lose a close game, and I don't see them winning, I think that will just inspire Kiffin even more. Going, hey, what with a few more players, I could have won this game, and I don't think that's going to happen at Ole Miss, and that's why that's why initially he wanted to go to Auburn.
Do you see him wanting to stay in the SEC, or do you see him going back to the West Coast, or where does he fit?
I think he likes it. I think the SEC, everybody thinks it's about to get much tougher. It is going to get much tougher, but it's also going to get easier to get to the playoffs. So, you look at the schedules next year with Oklahoma and Texas and all these games that you're going to see losses. Well, you can lose 3 or 4 games next year if you're really good, and if you have a tough schedule, and get in the playoffs. And I think that's what it's all about. It's not going to matter when on the final Monday night of the year if your record is 14-4. Nobody. It's going to be just like the NFL. Does anybody have any idea what the record of the Super Bowl champion is?
No.
Same way in college football starting next year. So I think Kiffin will. I think he likes it where he is.
Yeah, and we talked about that all the way back in the offseason of that's going to become another goal now. You've got, let's win our conference, let's get to a bowl game, whatever the ladder is for rebuilding a program. Now it's going to be, hey, how often can we contend for the 12-team playoff? And I know Freeze hasn't said it because he's not paying attention. He's just paying attention to being better. But that's starting next year, maybe, depending on, that could be, hey, that needs to be our goal every single year. Something like Tennessee as well. Like
it has to be.
Yeah, you should be trying to get there every year.
I mean, I have covered the sport a long time, as you guys know. Next year will be the most intriguing year in sports history, at least in the modern era, I should say.
Yeah.
And not only in the SEC and the Big Ten, where everything is different, but the playoff game. At what point? Let's say, Alabama and Georgia next year are probably going to play in the first month of the season. We know they're playing games in Tuscaloosa. Alabama wins a game. Does it really? So what? Georgia's got one loss. It's a matter of just trying to hang around and make it up somewhere else. It's not going to be like it is right now, where we're not going to be sitting here if you invite me back to and like it was 9 weeks ago with Alabama. It won't be. So what? They lost to Texas.
Before we let you go, let me ask you one more question. There's a debate, and I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but there's a debate, especially at Auburn, about, college football's changed a whole lot the last 10 years. Should a place like Auburn claim national championships like 2004, like 1983? A lot of people have have an opinion on 93, even the ones before that. What's your take on claiming things like that? Is that something that's worthwhile, or should Auburn?
I used to sit there as a columnist in Birmingham in the 80s and hear Alabama fans talk about the one in 42 when they came in third in the SEC, or the 73 when they lost to Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl, or 64 when I was in Arkansas a couple of years ago, and Jerry Jones was on our show, and I said to him, I said, "You're here, you're wearing a 1964 national championship ring. Do you realize Alabama won the national championship in '64?" And I thought the guy was going to take a swing. I was kind of hoping he would. I would have really done. I would have been extremely wealthy right now had Jerry Jones hit me. But I'm of the opinion, Ronnie, that they probably ought to claim it. It sounds great when you bring a recruit in and you see 7 national championships on the wall, as opposed to 3?
Yeah, they claim 2, right? 2010 and 1957. And to me, 83, 93 you're on probation, but 83 and 2004, I don't see a reason not to claim those.
Hey, I covered that team in 83. That team was the best team in the country. There's no way Miami would have beaten Auburn. Now, the problem is they beat them the next year, and it kind of it undid. But that was an amazing team by the end of the year. The 04 team, I think. Can't Tuberville just go ahead and introduce a bill in the Senate and declare Auburn the national champion in 2000?
I think he can.
He pretty much can do anything else. So why not?
I'm no politician, but
I call on Tommy to do that immediately.
Yeah, it was it 5 or 6 years ago, Oklahoma State. Remember they claimed that national title. I have no idea the year or anything like that, but I don't know if you guys remember that. And they threw a parade and stuff, and they brought back some of the. And it was like you're saying, Paul. Like there's no downside to it. College sports is already just about celebration. And
when you bring a kid on campus and he goes to Alabama and he sees, I don't know how. I swear I don't know how many. I did a big expose on this years ago in my early days, and I can tell you, they have a couple of fraudulent ones. But
More than a couple.
some sports information director at Alabama in the 80s decided to start counting them all. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not going to get into the mass media and how we all just accept whatever our favorite channel tells us to accept. But I think it's time for Auburn to say, you know what? We've won X number of national championships. Celebrate it. It may get you. I mean, if it gets you that quarterback from California one day that turns your program around, it was worth it.
Yeah, it's like I thought about Oklahoma State because in Bedlam, they've got now one end zone has a big.
Yeah.
It says 1945 national champions. I can't even remember if that's the one they reclaimed.
Doesn't matter.
It could be, and
make them up.
There's
and you remember the '88 team, the '88 Auburn team. I mean, they lost 7-6 to LSU in the earthquake game, and I mean that may have been Dye's best team.
Ronnie, everybody was there, but I was, and I don't think I've ever seen a tenser game in my entire career. I had a friend this young lady who was an Auburn fan. I know I'm really dating myself talking about my dating years. But I went to visit her at halftime because I hadn't seen her. She and her family, they were big Auburn people. And it was make a big commitment. I'm going to come down and, show you that I care. I got to her seat and she was numb. She literally couldn't speak. And I sat there with her for a few minutes in the third quarter. And I said, "Are you okay?" She said, I can't talk. I mean, it was like the tensest game I've ever seen. I finally said, I've had enough of this. So I'm going back to the press box and grab a hot dog. But she wasn't the only one. You talk to people who were there from Auburn, and the way that game ended, I mean, it was heartbreaking. And that team was amazing. Absolutely. I'd count that one too.
Well, on that note, Paul, I appreciate you being with us.
Listen, it's been my honor to be on an Auburn podcast, the school that's won 19 national championships.
Thank you, Paul. We appreciate it as always.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.